I'm sure you're familiar with the legendary Mothman, the mythical monster that terrorized the citizens of Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the late 1960s. But since this cryptid has been covered so much on YouTube, I wanted to focus on a lesser-known sighting all the way across the Atlantic that has a striking resemblance to the Mothman we all know and love today. So, I welcome you to my new series, Myth or Mortal, and tonight we are diving deep into the mystery that is the British Mothman. Our story begins in 1963 in Hythe, a small town on the south coast of England. It was a cold November night when John Flaxton, his friend Mervyn Hutchinson and their two girlfriends were walking home from a dance. The air was crisp, and the night was still as they walked down a lonely country road near Sandling Park. John was stargazing when he noticed something unusual in the sky, a bright light that at first glance he thought was a shooting star. But this was brighter than any falling star he had ever seen before, and one of his friends pointed out that it was closer than any of the other stars as well. Too close. The group watched as the light moved across the sky above them, growing closer and closer until it suddenly stopped, hovering just ahead a little further down the road. It was a bright golden oval, glowing intensely and obscuring whatever was behind it. They stood there, feeling both scared and intrigued. After what felt like several minutes but was probably only a few seconds, the light moved behind some trees in the park and disappeared. John described a strange feeling washed over him, a sudden coldness that seeped into his bones. The initial fascination suddenly turned very quickly into fear, although they couldn't pinpoint exactly what they were afraid of. Just an overwhelming sense that whatever they had just seen was something they shouldn't have. Deciding they wanted to get away from the situation as quickly as possible, the group began to run. And as soon as they did, the light reappeared, emerging out from the trees as though it was reacting to them. The light was now about 200 feet away, hovering 10 feet in the air over a field. And then they noticed another peculiar detail. When they ran, it followed them quickly, but if they stopped, it stopped too. The four of them stood still and watched as the light hovered before lowering behind some trees again, as if it needed them to be still before it could continue with whatever it was trying to do. The light vanished, leaving them in an eerie silence. Suddenly, from the direction where the light had disappeared, they heard the snap of a twig, then the crack of a branch breaking, and then the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. Emerging from the darkness was a large, dark figure. It was the size of a man but had no discernible head, or at least no neck that would make a head stand out and be more noticeable. Its feet looked strange, possibly webbed, and it had large bat-like wings protruding from its back, hunched over its shoulders. The teenagers didn't wait to see what the figure wanted. They ran faster than they had ever run before, finally stopping when they felt they were far enough away. They contacted the police who, surprisingly, took their story seriously. Despite it being four teenagers claiming to have seen a glowing light in the sky and a large, part bat, part man creature, but the fear on their faces convinced the officers that they had genuinely seen something that night, something that had shaken them to their very core. Each teenager was apparently interviewed separately, and all four of them described the events and what they saw in an essentially identical manner. Just a week later, on the evening of November 21st, Keith Croucher, a 17-year-old local, found himself walking alone through the fields near Sandling Estate. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting a blanket of darkness over the landscape. As Keith made his way through the quiet countryside, he started approaching the local football pitch, and his attention was suddenly drawn to a peculiar sight, a bright light emanating from the field. Intrigued, he approached cautiously. At first, he thought someone must be playing and had lit up the field for practice. However, as he drew nearer, he quickly realized that was not the case. A luminous oval-shaped object, surrounded by shimmering golden haze, hovered silently above the deserted field. Its aura so intense that it seemed to illuminate the entire area with an otherworldly glow. Keith squinted his eyes, trying to discern if there was anything behind the light creating the illumination. But no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't make out any discernible source. Transfixed by the spectacle before him, he watched in awe as the mysterious light began to move, gliding gracefully across the pitch before vanishing into the dark woods. Left bewildered by the inexplicable encounter, he could only stand in silence, his mind racing with questions about what he had just witnessed. A few nights later, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a bit of friendly daring, John McGoldrick and his friend decided to venture into these woods. They had been captivated by the strange reports by Flaxton and his friends, and they decided they wanted to see if they could uncover any mysteries for themselves. As they made their way through the dark, dense forest, the quiet of the night only heightened their senses. While they didn't encounter any eerie lights or cryptids that night, they did potentially find the location where Flaxton and his friends had their encounter with the creature. John stumbled upon a section of the woods where the underbrush was flattened, as if something massive had passed through, and nearby they discovered enormous footprints about 2 feet long, 9 inches wide, and 1 inch deep, deeply embedded in the soil. Excited and unnerved, John reported their findings. This drew the attention of 2 local journalists, who were initially skeptical but intrigued. They agreed to accompany John and his friend to the site a few weeks later, on December 11th. However, the journalists had their doubts, expecting to find nothing more than some fabricated tracks by the men themselves. As they neared the area in question, something unexpected happened. The forest all around them suddenly lit up with a large, radiant, pulsating glow. The light was so intense, illuminating the trees around them in a surreal display. All 4 men were struck with fear and awe, too scared to venture any further, and rather watched the mysterious light rooted to their spot for what must have felt like an eternity, though it was only about 30 minutes before the light faded away into the night. The experience left them with more questions than answers, deepening the enigma of what really lurked in those woods. Though they never found the source of the light or the origin of the footprints, their story from the woods became another chapter in the strange and compelling saga of the Kentish Mothman. Intriguingly, these sightings took place almost exactly 3 years before the notorious Point Pleasant Mothman encounters. The parallels between the 2 are uncanny. Both involve witnessing strange lights followed by chilling encounters with a large winged entity. While the Point Pleasant Mothman has become ingrained in American folklore, the mystery of the Hythe Mothman remains relatively obscure. Could these incidents be linked? Is the Hythe Mothman a distant relative of its American counterpart, or perhaps the same enigmatic being traversing continents? The striking similarities between these sightings certainly fuel speculation. Whether myth or mortal, the Mothman's mystery spans time and continents, and as we delve deeper into the unknown, only one truth remains. The witnesses hold the key. But amidst their stories, truth and deception dance. The Mothman's secrets may forever elude us, leaving us to wonder, will we ever truly know?